All right, well, welcome everyone, all of you denizens out there in Plague Land who've joined us today for Rain Gardens 101, Get Your Lawn a Job. My name is Matthew Bertrand. I've got a master's in landscape architecture degree with Friends of the Rouge, and I'm gonna be your host today because, right, what else do you have to do these days? Seriously though, now is a wonderful time to be building a rain garden, to be solving so many problems at home, getting your lawn a job to help with problems with icy sidewalks, water in your basement, small problems like that at home, and also big problems in your community, creating habitat for birds, for butterflies, for bees, for other pollinators, helping solving problems with flooding in your community, on your streets, and for people that live downstream from you. Rain gardens are a wonderful solution, and now is the perfect time to get started, to get outside and to build a rain garden at your home. And today we are going to get started together through Rain Gardens 101. This is the first in a three-part Lunch and Learn series, today, tomorrow at noon, and Thursday at noon. So I hope that you will join us all 3 days to get the orientation you need to get started. Moving forward, I've got blatant teasers for you. We have some door prizes today for those of you that are attending, whether you're live with us right now, or if you're watching this remotely or virtually, or later on watching the recording, you can be involved in these door prizes. We've got one 55-gallon rain barrel available for you. It could be black, green, gray, red, or blue as well. You also can get a free virtual rain garden coach consultation with Matthew Bertrand. Wait, who signed me up for that? No, just kidding. That is one of my absolute favorite things in the world to do, and I would love to be able to work one-on-one with you at your home to help you make a wonderful plan for your garden. So those are the door prizes today for your attendance, and at the very end of today's talk, so in about 20-25 minutes or so, you'll get the directions for how to enter into the drawing for that. So thanks again for joining us today for Rain Gardens 101. So today is day one. We're going to talk about rain gardens, the what, the why, and the where. Tomorrow, day two, we'll talk about sizing and digging your rain gardens, what shapes look great, how to make them a reality. And then on Thursday, day three, we'll talk about plants for rain gardens, and we're going to have a master rain gardener panel of folks that are, unlike me, are real people with real jobs and real lives that don't just go out digging rain gardens all day. They can share with you the real scoop on what it takes for you as a resident to design and build your own rain garden. So that's what we've got queued up for you. And without further ado, we're going to get started now with day one. First, a little bit about Friends of the Rouge. Friends of the Rouge has been around since 1986 when we kicked off with a first Rouge Rescue event. I'm hearing, folks cannot see the live video on Facebook. That is a problem. Let me see if I can take a moment to figure out the issue with that. Sorry for the interruption for the folks that are on Zoom. Let's see if I can briefly figure out that technical difficulty. Interesting. So Facebook required me to approve my own live stream event. Thank you very much, Facebook, for requiring me to approve myself. So I've now approved it. My apologies for the folks that are late catching up with us now. We're going to just keep forging ahead here, and you'll be able to watch, you'll be able to rewind. This is all going to be recorded. And for those of you who are just joining us late, my apologies for that technical difficulty. You didn't miss much. Just a little bit about the door prizes, a little bit about the structure for what we're going to be doing over the course of the next 3 days. So my apologies for that technical difficulty. I hope that that will be the only issue that comes up today. So I was introducing you to Friends of the Rouge, where our mission is to explore, restore, and enhance the Rouge River watershed. The Rouge has come so far since 1986 when we were pulling tires and shopping carts and cars out of the river. We now take folks out every year, I think even during the pandemic, to kayak on the river. And right now the Rouge Uncruise is going on. Tonight's the next iteration. You can join and get a great experience on your Rouge River. And we also invite you to join us in restoring the river, whether that's building your own rain garden with what you learned today, or if it's in a pandemic safe world, joining us for a large event during Rouge Rescue or beyond. Moving on. I'd like to thank our sponsors for the event today, Pure Oak and Water and the City of Southfield. Without support from these two organizations today would not have been possible. So thank you so much for making this event happen, for bringing this education, this resource to our community to help solve problems at home. So Rain Gardens 101, day one, the what? What exactly are these rain gardens that we've been hearing about? Well, I'm gonna get you started with this beautiful picture of a backyard here, and we're all gonna channel our inner Ouija boards today to try to identify where the rain garden is. I hope you can see my mouse. I want you all to shout out where it is, and through your collective force of will, you're gonna guide my mouse onto the rain garden. Looks like it's pulling a little bit over here. Oh, I don't know, is it, oh, it's getting pulled back this way, and where, down, oh, there we go. You all have found the rain garden to the bottom here. This is mostly a sedge rain garden, palm sedge, a native plant. It fits in beautifully with his backyard environment. And in fact, this was a trick question. There are two rain gardens. There's a second rain garden over here, and you can see the connection. So rain gardens can be a beautiful spot of any backyard or front yard. What's a rain garden? Pretty much just a hole in the ground. Dig a big hole, send the water to it, you're done. That's pretty much it. Even a kid can do it. Even a kid as cute as this one can do it. So, all right, that's it. We're done. Webinar done. Let's all go home. Oh, wait, Laura's telling me that, no, I need to keep going. I'm hearing from Laura that she still doesn't see the video, unfortunately, on the live stream. That is just a huge problem. Well, if anything, worst case scenario, we're gonna keep going. I am seeing that we are live right now. And so we're just going to keep going, and I'll share this video later on. So Laura, we're just going to keep forging ahead for the 35 folks that are here on Zoom, and we'll figure the Facebook thing out later on. So I guess I should keep going and tell you a little bit more about a rain garden, but pretty much that's it in a nutshell. We dig a hole 3 to 6 inches or so deep, and we send water to it. And that's pretty much it. We typically send the water from downspouts from a home, get the water away from our foundation about 10 feet, and get it out to a nice, shallow 3 to 6 inch garden space filled with beautiful native plants that absorb that water, soak it into the ground, and solve so many problems in our community. Here is a sample rain garden for you. This is at the Plymouth Municipal Yard. This is a rain garden that we built last spring. So before, you can see it's not the most attractive of entryways. Plymouth wanted to fix that. They also wanted to fix issues with water flooding from these downspouts right here and freezing up in the wintertime. Here is the after we ripped up about 1,000 square feet of asphalt and dug that shallow depression where the water ponds and sinks in, and this garden soaks up so much water. It soaks up about 6,000 gallons of water in a typical storm. Here is another sample rain garden. This is a residence in the Canton area, the Vyers residence. They are on Canton clay, heavy clay that does not want to soak water up. You can see during a rainstorm the amount of water pooling between their homes and spilling off. In the wintertime, this would freeze up for them and create hazardous conditions. So they wanted to use a rain garden to solve it. And here is the after picture. I took this picture just a couple weeks ago. They built a garden on their property, and their neighbors, the Schock family, built a garden over on that side, and those two gardens together soak that water up and help to solve flooding problems. Here is another sample garden for you. This is the House residence. This is in Plymouth Township. They also are on heavy clay soil. They could not mow the lawn in between the two properties for much of the spring because of how wet the soils were. They wanted to use a rain garden to solve that. And here is Anne with her rain garden this spring, 1 year after we installed that rain garden. She designed the garden herself through the Master Rain Gardener training program, and then we helped her to build it. You can see just how gorgeous those plants are doing. The cardinal flower is in full bloom. The black-eyed Susans are doing wonderfully well. It's a beautiful rain garden. Here's a picture of the shot of the garden from the other side, and you can see the pop-up emitter right there. We're taking water from her roof and sending it straight into the garden rather than into that swale right there. And there's a huge collection of native irises there just ready to soak that water up. It's a beautiful garden. So what do rain gardens look like? Well, rain gardens can look like pretty much any garden out there, right? Gardens can look like just about whatever you want them to look like, and rain gardens are pretty much no different. If you've got the right soils, you can have a lawn grass rain garden. If you've got, if you want to have a manicured rain garden, you can do that. Typically, we put those in the front yard, right, where you want to put your best face forward. You can also have more of a habitat-focused rain garden. There's many diversity of native plants as possible. Typically put those in the backyard where you can really bring your lawn to life and enjoy the wildlife that your garden brings in. But that said, you can do it wherever you want. This picture here is a backyard rain garden, and this habitat-focused rain garden is a front yard rain garden. So really, whatever aesthetic you've got, you can have a rain garden that fits it. What do rain gardens cost? Well, it varies pretty dramatically. If you're doing it yourself, I've got some sample costs up here. You want to buy plants, maybe 100, 200 bucks, something like that. 3 inches of shredded hardwood mulch, but you could get that for free potentially from a tree trimming company. And then about 3 inches of compost potentially, and you can sometimes get that for free from your municipality as well. So a DIY rain garden can be very, very low cost, up to the cost to hire a professional. I'm gonna move my picture here so you can see. Those costs can vary dramatically. So maybe $15 to $20 a square foot. You can find it for less, you can find it for more. You can pay as much as you want for it. There are folks out there that will build you the Taj Mahal of rain gardens if that's what you're looking for. So it's really going to vary depending on who you find. And our website has a list of consultants out there that can do it for you. Moving on, I'm going to give you the story of a rain garden here, a sample rain garden built by Tricia in 2013 in the Ann Arbor area to step you through what her personal experience was building that rain garden. So here's a picture in the wintertime when we're often doing our planning. Through the Master Rain Gardener Training Program, she designed this garden herself with feedback each step of the way from expert landscape designers. She felt confident to build it herself. And here you can see where she dug out the garden, pretty shallow rain garden, like I said earlier, about 3 to 6 inches deep is typical. And she got a big rainstorm after she dug it out, which is great because it led her test. You want to have the garden be as flat as possible so you can see the water is spreading nicely across the space. That's what helps it really work to soak in that water. She got a delivery of compost and mulch. Compost helps to amend even the worst of soils so that the garden performs well and the plants thrive. And then that mulch layer on top helps it look great and keep weeds down. And then here it is right after she planted it when the plants were still pretty young. And here is the garden 1 year later, starting to look great. So you can see her process from start to finish of building that rain garden. All right, so now I think we have a sense for what a rain garden is. And if you've got questions on that, hold your questions when we get to the end of this. In just a few more minutes, we'll take those questions and work through them. So now we're gonna shift into the why. Why do we do rain gardens? Why has Friends of the Rouge set the goal for 1,000 rain gardens for the Rouge by 2025? Well, we've got some big picture challenges here in Southeast Michigan. This is a picture from the Arbor Day Foundation that I love because it really sums up where we're at today, right? Feel free to type into the comment box if you're on Facebook especially, or on the Zoom, what problems you see here while I'm talking through them. But as you can see, taking a look at this, compared to 200 years ago when the majority of Southeast Michigan was a natural land cover, we now have these hard surfaces. We've got big parking lots, big roofs on our warehouses, on our big box stores, on our community institutions. We've got our roofs at home. We've got our roadways, all of these hard surfaces that don't let water soak in like it used to. And instead, it has to go somewhere. So we get these flooded streets and we get these dirty creeks here. In the Rouge system itself, after a major rainstorm, the waters get really high and erode the banks. And the water also carries a lot of pollution with it. The metals from our brakes as they wear down, the tire treads as they wear down, the oils from our cars. Really, our cars are one of the major sources for pollution in the river. All of that water gets concentrated. Looking at some of the homes here, you can see flooded backyards as the water runs off from our roofs and just sits there. Most of our lawns are pretty heavily compacted and don't soak up the water like it used to. So lots and lots of problems here. What's the solution to it? Well, we want to soak up that rain. You can see here, beautiful vision for where we want to see Southeast Michigan to go. A lot more tree cover throughout with rain gardens at our homes that help soak up that water where it falls. There are green roofs in this picture. There are parking lots that have rain gardens mixed in throughout them. All of these things add up to a much better job soaking up the rain so the river runs much cooler, much cleaner, much more level throughout the season. And this community's built even a kayak launch so folks can get onto the river cover more easily. This is the vision for where we want to go. All this tree cover is going to cool the community off so the heat events in the summertime don't get nearly as extreme. They're also going to help filter the air. All of these things together add up to a much more livable community with higher quality of life where we can all thrive together. Now, this looks like a lot, right? This looks like a huge change from the before to the after, but I want to drill down for you onto just one home so we can see what it takes to add up to this change. So here's just one home with the before and after. And when we look down into this narrow focus, it's not that big a change. You can see there's two trees that were planted. There's a rain garden that was planted right here to soak up this water. That's about it. It's not that big a change when we look at each one of our houses. And the reality for the Rouge, the 467 square miles of the Rouge, half that, 50% of it, is single family homes. And so the actions at our homes add up to a huge impact. That's why Friends of the Rouge has set that goal for 1,000 rain gardens by 2025, is that each of our gardens solves real problems at home that we're all dealing with, and they add up to a beautiful future for Southeast Michigan communities to enjoy. So this is where we're trying to get, and you can be a part of that effort, soaking up the rain, getting your lawn a job. All right, one other why. So why rain gardens? Part of it is the question, why native plants? We tend to use native plants in rain gardens. We don't have to, but rain gardens with native plants, the native plants tend to perform very, very well in rain gardens. Many of our native plants are well adapted. And the thing about rain gardens and native plants is those native plants bring our lawns to life. This is a picture of, I think, a relationship that many of us have heard about over the past few years of monarchs and milkweeds, right? We pretty much know at this point how monarch caterpillars depend upon milkweed plants for their survival. What not everyone has seen are these pictures from Mexico showing the entire North American population of monarchs all congregating together to overwinter on the fir trees down there. It's an incredible transformation from green trees to orange trees as millions of monarchs come together. It's an amazing life cycle, and it all depends on a relationship between a plant and a specific insect. And what I want you to realize today is that most of our native plants have relationships like that. When we plant native plants in our yard, we bring our lawns to life for so many living creatures. Here's an example of a double-toothed prominent, Nereis bidentata, on an elm leaf. And you can see tracing its back the very shape of the elm leaf that it's eating there. This insect has a relationship that has evolved, that has co-evolved over millennia, through which this insect eats this plant. This plant is a primary food source for this insect. And so these native plants mean we have so many more insects in our gardens than we would have otherwise. And those insects are bird food. They are essential bird food for songbirds especially. Songbirds depend on caterpillars, on insects, for about 95% of the food that those baby birds need to survive. So when we plant native plants, we get more good bugs, and those bugs bring us more birds. So that is part of why we like to have rain gardens with native plants. Native bees, you may have heard, are also in decline right now. Many native bees have specific relationships with specific native plants. I've shown a few of them here, from our sweat bees to our mason bees to our bumblebees, all on plants that you can plant in a rain garden environment. So your rain garden can help solve problems for bees. Your rain garden can bring your lawn to life. Here's a cardinal flower, a beautiful plant that works very well in rain gardens with the hummingbird that it attracts. And that flower is designed to attract hummingbirds. Lastly, here is a picture of one of my favorite moths, the clear-wing moth. It is a day-flying moth, and if you don't look carefully, you're going to think it's a hummingbird because it flies just like a hummingbird. And it's supping here from a monarda, a native plant cultivar. So this is a beautiful example of some of the ways that your rain garden can bring your lawn to life. So you can solve big problems, small problems at your home with a rain garden, and you can bring your lawn to life with a rain garden. All right, so we talked about what's a rain garden, why a rain garden. Now we're going to wrap up today's Lunch and Learn with where. I want to leave you with a sense for where to place a rain garden at your home so that tonight you can go outside and maybe get a tasty beverage and look out upon your yard and think about where might work in your yard for a rain garden so that when you come back tomorrow, you will be ready to dive into the sizing and digging questions. So where? on your home should a rain garden go? The thing I want you to come away with is the Hippocratic oath of a master rain gardener. First, do no harm. The reality is there are so many places that a rain garden can go. Instead, what we want to do is figure out where the bad places are, where we can avoid putting a rain garden, and then that'll leave us with lots of options at our homes typically for where a rain garden can go. So we want to do no harm. We want to make sure there's enough space, that the slopes work out, that we avoid obstacles, that we don't create hazards at our homes, and that we plan for an emergency overflow when we get those 100-year storms that hit. We want to make sure our gardens are safe. Those are the keys that we're going to look for in terms of site selection. I'm going to step you all now through a little series of quizzes. I'm going to show you pictures like this, and you can type into your chat boxes what you think. What about this picture here? Is there enough space for a rain garden to go in this area? What do you think? Go. All right, I'm going to talk it through a little bit. So typically, we like to see about 20% space. So if you've got a 100 square foot roof area, we want to see about 20 square foot for that rain garden. That's our rule of thumb for sizing. So in a big building like this is a teeny tiny space right here. It is not nearly big enough. There's probably utilities here as well, and it's very close to the building. So there is not enough space here. So if you live in a postage stamp lot, you've just got a teeny tiny space next to your home, you might think about piping the water underground to a space where there is room. As long as you've got some slope, a 1% slope for the pipe, you can send that water some distance actually. So here's an example of someone that piped the water along a narrow area of their home up to the front yard space where there was room for the rain garden to go. So when we're working with tight spaces, sometimes there are ways to move the water where it's going to work for your rain garden. All right, next example. What about this home here? Is there space here for a rain garden that's going to work? Type it into your chat box. What do you think? Is there space here for a rain garden? What are the obstacles that we're dealing with here? So the obstacle here is going to be there's a tree in the hellscape, so we don't really want to get the water out there, and there's a sidewalk that would make it hard to get there. And right here, we're not quite 10 foot from our home. We're a little bit close to our home. We want to do something here, right? As is, this water is outletting pretty close to the house, but it's going to be difficult to build a rain garden in this kind of space here. We want it to be a little farther away. All right, here is another example. What about here? Coming down from this roof downspout right here. Is this a good spot? Some open space here. Can we put a rain garden here? What do you think? All right. Answer here is we're a little close to that tree. Look at that big tree right there. We do not want to dig within the drip canopy of a tree. Those trees have big roots, and when we start severing them, we risk the health of those trees. And those trees do so many wonderful things for us. We want those trees to survive. It's not worth killing a tree to get a rain garden in place. And also, we don't want that tree, especially this one's close to the house, to drop a limb on the roof. So we really don't want to dig within that drip canopy. We want to see for this house, can we get the water farther away to an open spot, a little bit further away from that tree? All right, how about here? Can we put a rain garden here? Feel free to type it into your chats. Is this a good spot for a rain garden? Sure would be a nice place, right? With the water outletting onto this driveway apron, there is going to be slippery, icy conditions here in the wintertime that this poor guy sipping his cup is going to just slip and fall on and hurt himself. So this is a problem. It's terrible when we've got our gutter downspouts outletting onto our driveway aprons, onto hard surfaces like this. So it would be great to do something here, but it's a little bit difficult, right? There's a sidewalk that gets in the way. It would be lovely to send the water under that sidewalk to this adjacent area where there's a little bit more space, and maybe even screen that air conditioner. So this could potentially work for a rain garden, but it's a little bit difficult to do it. So it'd be nice to start on something easier potentially. Although since there are serious problems here, this might be the kind of rain garden that it's worth going to some effort for, even for your first time around. All right, how about this one? Is this a good spot for a rain garden right here? I'm going to say nope, the slopes are a little bit steep. This is going to be a very hard space to build a rain garden right here because of that. It is possible to build a rain garden on steep slopes. So here's an example of a terraced rain garden, the time-honored, several millennia-old tradition of building terraces along steep slopes. Does work for rain gardens. However, I would not counsel you to start on something so hard for your very first rain garden. Try to find something that's a little bit less steep to build your first rain garden. All right, I think it's our last thing to think about in terms of obstacles is misdig. You want to call misdig 811 so you can get your underground utilities marked. You'd be amazed, you build this beautiful rain garden design and then you go to dig and you find out, boom, underground utilities all throughout the area that you hadn't planned for. You want to find out what is under the soil at your home so you can make sure you put your rain garden in the right place so you don't create an expensive mistake. Always call misdig before you're doing any digging so that way you can make sure that you keep yourself safe and your home safe as well. All right, we're going to leave it with a quiz now. So which side at this home? This is the same home. We've got the right side of the home. We've got the left side of the home. What is our best place to put a rain garden? So type it into your chats. Which side would you pick? Say this is your home and you're going to build a rain garden. Which side do you think would be the best side to build on? All right. I can see folks starting to put some answers into the chat, and I'm going to start talking through some of the pros and cons here before I give the final answer. And the reality for any rain garden site is that there are going to be pros and cons. As long as we can avoid any serious problems, that's going to be what we're looking to avoid. So on the right side here, we've got some roof water coming down, and it's probably pooling in this sidewalk area right here, potentially creating slip hazards in the wintertime. So there's a problem to solve here. So that's a good thing. But, right, getting past that sidewalk is going to be a little bit tricky. So this might not be an easy rain garden to do. It's a little bit steep coming down the slope here, but I'm going to say my gut is it's not too steep. I think that's actually a pretty good slope to build a rain garden on, so it's not too steep necessarily if you can get the water past the sidewalk. And this is just an open lawn canvas. I think this would be a great spot to bring your lawn to life, to add some color, add some splashes of color to your lawn area here to make it a little bit more interesting. So that could work potentially. Looking over onto the left side of the house here, the downspout, it's coming down right behind these arborvitaes, so it's accessible. It's a little bit more accessible than the right side. We've got a tree here, it looks like maybe a silver maple to watch out for, so we don't want to dig too close over here. But over in this spot over here, there's a little bit of open area, so that could potentially work as well. Now, let's get to the answer. Let's see what this homeowner did. The answer is the left side. That person picked the left side to get started on, which makes sense. It was probably an easier garden to get going with versus the other one. But the reality is either side could work. And the reality is that most homes have room for more than one rain garden. Obsessive professional that I am, I'm digging my fourth one right now at my home because I have the space for it. So it's going to be best, I think, to start as small as possible. Pick your easiest rain garden so that way you can learn on that easy rain garden before you start tackling the hard ones. And if you can start in your backyard, that gives you some time and space to experiment, to figure out what's going to work for you before you move onto a front yard space. For me, I love to see front yard rain gardens because then your hard work helps to teach your friends and neighbors as well about the value of a rain garden. And it's going to be those front yard rain gardens that help us hit that 1,000 rain garden goal. But for your first rain garden, I think it's best to start as small and simple as possible. All right, that's about it for our active education component of our Rain Gardens 101 for day one, the what, the whys, and the wheres. I'm gonna wrap things up here, and then we are gonna shift to questions. I can stick around till as late as 1 o'clock is when the webinar is gonna cut us off, and we'll answer whatever questions we can live. A reminder that tomorrow we're gonna come back for sizing and digging. And then day 3, we'll talk about plants for your rain garden, and we'll have a panel of master rain gardeners that you can ask questions of to hear about their real experience. Now we're going to get to the door prizes. I've got the link here for you. For those of you that made it this far, you can go to therouge.org/door-prize-1 to fill out the brief course evaluation. And once you do that, you'll get the link to enter the drawing for the door prizes. You can enter 3 times total, 1 for each of the 3-part lunch and learn days. or you can just enter the ones, whatever your preference is. And we'll do that drawing next week, Wednesday, September 2nd, for the rain barrel and for that free consultation with yours truly. Thanks once more to our sponsors, Pure Oak and Water and the City of Southfield. Thank you so much for making today possible. And with that, I'm going to shift to questions. We will take your questions. Let's see what has built up over the course of the event. Laura, are you still with us? Do you want to come on in? I think I forgot to introduce Laura at the start. Laura Edwards has been with us this whole time, helping to answer some of your questions as we've been moving on. Laura, do you have some questions built up for us to answer today?
Well, actually, I've been pretty idle because I think you're explaining things so incredibly well. I think the questions are now coming in at the very bottom. Hi, Natalie. I'm so glad to see you're here. She wonders if she signed up for the seminar, is she signed up for all three?
That's a great question. So yeah, if you signed up, right, we're going to figure out what the Facebook problem was, but in theory, you signed up for all three. So we'll send you, if you're going to do it through Zoom, I'll send you a link tomorrow morning so you can get on tomorrow's, or if you're doing it through Facebook, however you found it today, if you found it, hopefully you found it, should work again tomorrow. So yes, I would love to have you join us for the next 2 days as well.
Okay, and then there's a great question from Leah. She is wondering how a rain garden differs from a rock garden, and could she combine the two?
Yeah, so you absolutely could. Really, for the rule of thumb is just about anything you can do in a normal garden, you can do in a rain garden, but there's going to be implications in the decisions you make. So if you would love to see a rock garden, you could certainly make a rock garden work with a rain garden. Things to watch out for, though, is rock gardens can be tricky from a maintenance standpoint in that you see each and every weed that comes up through those rocks. They just pop out. And so rock gardens can be a little bit higher maintenance. And the other thing about a rock garden is the plants that you typically pick for a rock garden are super, super drought tolerant, hardy plants. And not all of those plants would like the water that's going to come with a rain garden. If your garden is on sandy soils, and there are some of you in the Rouge that have beach sand down 8 feet, I've seen it, I've built gardens on it. If you've got that kind of garden space, you might even be able to use the same plants that you would use in a traditional rock garden. But what you're going to want to do if you do a rain garden, rock garden, is just be very cautious in the plant selection to make sure that what you're picking can survive both the wet and the dry. All right, that's a great question, Leah. Thank you.
Hey, Matthew.
Yeah,
We've
what's
got
up?
a question from Colleen on Facebook and again from Anne on Zoom.
Okay.
No, we're recording this event on Zoom. How will we share the recording later?
Sure, that's a great question. So we will plan to share it, right, barring further technical difficulties, on our YouTube channel. We'll also share it on our Facebook page, and someday we'll get it up on our website as well. So we'll try to have it in so many places that you can't help but find it. All right.
We do have a few more questions. Do
What do
we
we
have
got?
time, Matthew?
I'm glad to stick around for another half an hour. Laura, if you got to get going, then I can try to dive in the chat as well. We've got this webinar going for that long. So for folks that are ready to be done, or you've got work or kids that are screaming in the background, you're certainly welcome to get back to it. But as long as I've got questions to answer, I'm glad to be here.
We have some really great ones.
Awesome.
Okay, so just one confirmation from Paulette. How far away should you have your rain garden? Did you say 10 feet?
10 foot is the rule of thumb, and it's really a good number to work with. There's some variation in terms of your soils that impacts that 10-foot guideline, and then also just how firm the structure is. If you've got like a 3-story tall, massive brick structure that's incredibly heavy and in sandy soil with no basement, I wouldn't mind the garden getting much closer to the building. There's just not necessarily going to be a threat to the building. But if you've got, a home, especially like a wood frame home that's built on heavy clay soils, you're going to want to keep that water at least that 10 foot away from the foundation so you don't have any freeze thaw issues happen with your home, and so that you're keeping water out of that basement. So 10 foot is really a good rule of thumb. You can cut it a little bit closer if you absolutely have to, but really try to stay 10 feet away just for to protect your property. It's really the number one. There's so many good places that we can build a rain garden. There's just no reason to threaten anyone's property while we're building them.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. This question is from Annette. If you have a backyard area that floods, wouldn't that be the logical place to start, assuming that there are none of the obstacles you mentioned?
Well, that is truly one of the best questions uh, for sizing and siting. And really, actually, it's something I need to get proactive about to give you more information, because that's really folks' natural instinct, right? You've got a wet spot, you've got a low spot in your yard. Let's put a rain garden on top of it. And to some degree, that works. The issue, though, that comes up is that sometimes that spot is getting tons of water from all of your roof downspouts. Sometimes that spot is getting water from your neighbors' houses as well, all flowing to your one central point. And sometimes it's just way too much water in that spot to deal with. And so that can make that spot a very difficult place sometimes to build a rain garden. So what ends up working a little bit better is try to work backwards to build a little bit more upstream. So rather than that low spot far away from your house, can you get a little closer to your home, 10 feet away still, but maybe if you've got plantings 10 feet away from your home, maybe you can build that rain garden to attach it onto those existing gardens to do several small gardens connected to each downspout rather than one large garden at the very end in that wet spot. So basically, rather than trying to make that wet spot work, try to keep the water out of that wet spot farther upstream. That tends to work better if you can do it. If you can't do it, if you have to work in that low spot, then it's going to be just you want to be very careful just to figure out how much water is going there. And you're going to probably want to pick plants that can tolerate a whole lot of water. And some rain garden plants can literally be underwater, under 3 inches of water all year long and survive. So it's those kind of plants for those kinds of areas that you might need to pick. That's jumping us ahead a little bit to the picking a plant section. But those are some of the things you're going to want to think through. So it's better to do several smaller gardens higher up, closer to your downspout, rather than that one large garden farther down. And I'm going to spend a little more time on this question because it is such a good question and such an important question. If you're doing those several small gardens farther up, one thing you can do is just pick one. So you're doing a smaller garden than you would if you did that big garden farther down, which is great. Start with just one downspout, figure out how to make that rain garden work, make it beautiful, make it work, and then see what happens. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that solves that issue farther downstream with wetness, all in and of itself. Maybe you don't need to build any more rain gardens. Of course, right? I'd love to see you build 1,000,000 rain gardens, but maybe that one is good enough. If it's not, then you can build a second one that's connected to the other downspout. Again, trying to keep those gardens upstream to dry out that area that's farther downstream. If after that second one is installed, if it's still not dry at that bottom spot, then at that point, maybe build a rain garden down there. But figure out where the water's coming from for that wet spot down there. All right, I'm going to pause on that one now. That really is an excellent question. That's one I get all the time. And it's a really important one for folks to think about. So my rule of thumb of starting small, starting simple really does apply. Don't bite off more than you can chew by trying to build a garden in that giant wet spot down at the end of your property. That sometimes is just too hard a place to start. All right, Laura, I'm gonna wrap up on that question now. Do we have any other questions queued up?
We have a whole bunch, and thanks for your really thorough answer. And thanks for your great questions, everyone. Yeah, we have a bunch more. Roz on Facebook Live is curious if it's okay to have a rain garden in the quote hell strip, which I believe is another term for easement.
Yes, it is. That is my
Okay.
favorite term for the easement. It is a hellacious space, right? So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Hell Strip, or it's the easement, as Laura had said also, it's that space at your home that is right next to the street. Typically, it's in between the sidewalk and the street. Sometimes it goes a little farther, or the easement area goes a little farther up your property, but it's really that space between the sidewalk and the street. It tends to be really dry. A lot of heat gets reflected off of the street. So it ends up being a very hard place to be. There's a lot of salt in that area coming off of the road. Oftentimes there's extra pollution in those areas, especially if it's a high traffic area. The answer is yes, you absolutely can build a rain garden in that area. You're typically going to want to make sure that it is legal for you to build a rain garden in that area since you don't actually own that property. I have heard of guerrilla gardens happening in those spaces without permission, but it is definitely better to get permission in those areas. And the reality is that pretty much every community wants to see more rain gardens. And so they probably will be all in for you to do it. They're going to give you guidelines to help make sure that you don't create problems in those areas. Within Hell Strip gardens, we want to especially make sure that we're not having tall gardens with tall plants that will block people's line of sight. So we want to plant low growing plants in those Hell Strips so that people can still see when they're driving for safety, and pedestrians can see as well. But it's really going to be just picking plants that are salt tolerant and that can handle those the drought conditions and the wet conditions, i.e. a typical rain garden plant. There are, I should show, I think in the next couple days, some pictures of some Hell Strip rain gardens. There are plenty of examples out there of people doing it. And from a municipal context, from a city context, there are some beautiful rain gardens that have been built all around the country within those hard areas. So rain gardens can absolutely work in that area. I wouldn't necessarily start there though. Thinking about the principle of picking the easiest garden possible to start, a Hell Strip might not be the easiest place to work. All right, Laura, I'm ready for the next question.
Okay, and you know, as a follow-up, if folks are interested in thinking about what plants to plant, they can definitely go to the rouge.org backslash or slash, help me out here, Rain Smart.
I don't know which slash it is. RainSmart, yeah, slash
Rain
RainSmart.
Smart.
Yeah, we
And
have tons of resources on there.
right.
And pretty much everything that we talk about here, I try to have that information available on the website as well in different forms. So you'll find plant lists on there that you can draw from, simple visual plant lists, detailed crazy long plant lists for the kind of gardeners that like those kinds of plant lists. So tons of plant lists available. You'll also find actually on our website recordings from the Master Rain Gardener training program. So you can actually sit down and set yourself out for free watching the 5-part in-depth Master Rain Gardener training program with a lot more information than what I'm sharing today in this abbreviated 101 version. So tons of resources on there. And you can also participate on there in the Rain Smart Challenge, which is our fun game during the next rainstorm for you to get out on your property and follow that raindrop, see where the water comes, where it goes across your property. So lots of fun ways that you can get involved on there at the rouge.org/rainsmart.
Okay, great. I have a question from Anonymous, and I think
Anonymous.
many people are thinking about this question, and that is, if we can't plant under a tree, what can we do under a tree?
What can you do under a tree? Wow, there's so many things you can do under a tree. I love to do a rain dance is one of my favorite things to do under a tree. But you probably mean from a gardening standpoint. And so for that, really, I think about that under the catch-all term of a conservation landscape. And so that's, you know, not a rain garden, but ideally it's going to still be a diverse native plant environment, as diverse as you can. It's just not going to be dug down, essentially. You're just going to plant at the grade that's already there. If there's lawn there, you're going to maybe want to kill the lawn first. You could potentially just smother it, like lay some cardboard down and some mulch to kill the lawn that way, and then just plant right in it. You really don't want to have lawn right up to the tree. So if you've got that, you absolutely want to fix that. So many trees get damaged and die even from lawnmowers that end up nicking the roots when they're mowing the lawn near the tree. So you want to convert that space under the tree into, at the very least, a mulch space, and ideally a space that's mulched and planted with native plants. And so you can have that conservation value supporting those birds and those butterflies in that area underneath the trees. And also, if you've got more of a diverse palette there of deep-rooted native plants, you're going to get a bit of a better water management situation as well underneath that tree. So lots of reasons to shift from long grass under the tree into more of a diverse planting palette. And the nice thing is that, you know, you could build your rain garden just outside of the drip canopy, and then under the tree you can plant it with other things. You can make that look like one contiguous bed, essentially, of plants. You know, the rain garden doesn't have to be an island unto itself. You can always design a rain garden to be attached to whether it's an existing foundation planting at your home, or if it's you know, around a tree area, you can connect that rain garden into your existing spaces.
Great, thank you. How about Paulette wonders, can a rain garden be planted on top of utility lines? A lot of folks have
Ah,
lines going right through the middle of their yard.
mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
So the answer to that is it's going to depend a little bit on the utility line, actually. And if you're at all in doubt, the answer is going to be no. Like there are typically going to be other places that you can consider, and so it's just best not to deal with utility lines. But that said, if really the utility line space is the only place you can be working, you really have to know your utility lines. So for example, your water line is typically about 6 feet down, right underneath the frost layer. And so I am not concerned about building rain gardens on top of water lines. However, I want to make sure that we're picking plants that are not going to send deep tap roots down that are going to disrupt that water line. So we want to be very careful about that. Typically, electrical lines end up being a lot more shallow. I don't want you to come anywhere near an electrical line. Stay far, far away from those. Gas lines are a bit of a gray area, right? We certainly don't want to damage a gas line. It's a very dangerous thing to do. Gas lines are typically about 3 feet down, although not always. Just when you make that assumption, you're going to find your home has a very shallow gas line. So if you are going to be dealing with a rain garden near a gas line, you're going to want to call Miss Dig, which is a free service, and do a test dig, basically. So very carefully, I like to almost scrape the soil with a pickaxe. So you're not hitting the soil, you're just scraping away till you find what the depth of that gas line is. The thing to watch out though around a gas line though is that typically the line is surrounded with sand. And so especially if you're on heavy clay soils, what can happen sometimes if you build a rain garden near that gas line is the water soaks into the gas line and then the water runs along that gas line sand bed to your home. So it kind of gets back to, you may be able to build near a gas line, you probably can build near a water line, but there are hazards associated with both still. And so it's really, something to be cautious of, to avoid if you're able to. Build away from those utility lines at all costs. And if the folks from Pure Oak and Water are watching, I hope I didn't say anything you're uncomfortable with. We can try to add disclaimers if I did.
So I like your description of the water just traveling along the clay, along your pipe back to your house, which is the last thing you want.
Nope, don't want that.
Thinking about clay, Eileen was curious. She has hard clay. Would she just need a lot of compost in her rain garden?
Compost definitely helps. The more you can amend the soil, the better off you are in a heavy clay environment. If you've got shallow groundwater in addition, you might need something more. So that's going to be where it's going to be really helpful to know what you're dealing with altogether with conditions. But if you're dealing with just heavy clay alone, what I typically recommend for folks is that they make the garden bigger and more shallow. So I think I mentioned, we're going to talk sizing more next time, that 20% is my typical sizing recommendation. If you're dealing with heavy, heavy clay, you want to make it bigger. I'm talking about maybe 30% or so. Make the garden more 3 inches deep, so much shallower garden. So you're spreading that water across. So even though it soaks in slowly, you've got much more area for it to soak in. Typically, 3 inches is sort of the bare minimum amount of compost to add in. So you basically want to dig an extra 3 inches of soil, remove that clay, and then mix in about 3 inches of compost. That works in most heavy clay situations. That said, if you can't hit that 30%, if you're in a smaller area, there are some folks out there that recommend digging much, much deeper. There's a whole series of test case rain gardens in the Southfield, Lathrop Village area, where they dug 18 inches down and replaced it with 18 inches of good amended soil. And those gardens do amazingly well. The water soaks in so well in those spaces. That's probably not something I expect most people are going to do as a DIY project. And so that's where we typically recommend that 3-inch level of compost, because that's something that most people can do at home. And typically the gardens perform. If you size it about that 30% with 3 inches of compost, the gardens will do well and survive and thrive. But if you're in a tougher situation, there are ways to work in heavy clay. It just starts to get to be really a professional garden. If you're in heavy clay soils with a very tight space, you're probably going to want to have a professional do the garden for you.
Thank you, Matthew. That's great. We do have a few more questions, and thanks to everyone who's with us and listening. A couple more where questions, Matthew.
Where, and that's the topic of the day. Let's hit them.
Topic of the day. So, one question from Joe is, can rain gardens be used with sump pump discharge?
Ah, yes, sump pump gardens. It is a whole thing, the sump pump garden. It is different than a rain garden. A sump pump garden is not the same thing. And the question is going to be really the how much water that sump pump is putting out and what your soils are like. So for example, if you've got a sump pump that's putting out a ton of water, but you're on sandy soils, then I'm not too worried about it. Following typical rain garden sizing will probably work out. But if you've got a sump pump that's putting out a lot of water on heavy clay soils, if you're not careful, you're going to have a wetland, and you'll need to plant it as a wetland rather than as a rain garden. And so it's really going to depend on your soils, the amount of water that sump pump is putting out. And that's a little bit trickier to size. That's not something that we can cover in Rain Gardens 101. So if you've got that sump pump situation, you're going to want to spend a little bit more time doing some research on sizing. Pay attention though just to how often that sump pump is running in the springtime. Spring is typically the worst season for the sump pump, when the soils are already saturated and that sump pump is running like crazy, getting the water out of your basement area. So to really pay attention in the springtime, how often is that sump pump running? How much water is coming out each time? What's the load like that your garden is going to be dealing with? But a rain garden type environment, more of a wetland style garden, can be a great way to manage sump pump water. I've even seen people make ponds out of their sump pumps. So there's a lot of ways to put that sump pump water to good use. But I wouldn't just follow the basic rain garden advice and assume it's going to work. You're going to have to do a little bit more homework on that.
Thank you. Okay, now question from Michelle. She's doing a lot right already. She's got rain barrels. Her downspouts are going into rain barrels,
Nice.
but there's water coming off her driveway.
Okay.
And she's curious, your thoughts. We said 10 feet away from the house. What does that apply to garages? So she's got a freestanding garage on a cement slab. What do you think about putting a rain garden near the garage?
Okay. So the safe to manage that driveway water, yeah, the safe rule of thumb is really that 10-foot guideline. So if in doubt, stick to the 10-foot. That said, typically the biggest problem from any residents from the river's perspective is that driveway apron water, right? It often gets a downspout that flows onto that driveway apron. The apron is huge. Ton of water comes off of it, and it pretty much goes straight into the storm sewer system very quickly. So if you're able to manage water coming off of your driveway apron, and your goal is the river's health, that's really the best place to be doing a rain garden. But if you've got a slab, you've got no basement, it's going to depend a little bit on the soils. So if you have crazy sandy soils, and you've got just a slab, I'm comfortable with you getting a little bit closer to the garage space because the water is going to soak into the ground pretty quickly and is going to be less likely to freeze thaw to damage that slab. And since there's no basement, right, we're not worried about the water getting into a basement. So if your garage without a basement is on sandy soil, I'm okay with you getting a little bit closer. I still wouldn't build it right next to the garage. I'm thinking maybe 5-foot distance. But if your garage is on clay soil, then I would still keep to that 10-foot distance because the freeze thaw issue on the clay soil will still be a threat to the garage itself. And right, the reality is, we're retrofitting here, right? None of our homes were designed with rain gardens in mind. And so oftentimes we just have to kind of do the best we can with the spaces that we have to try to make something work out. We'll talk about sizing tomorrow. Gardens can be undersized, they can be oversized. Whatever your situation is, we can find a way to work with it. But we really, at our core, just want to be making sure we're doing no harm, that Hippocratic Oath of the Master Rain Gardener. Even if there's no place that you can do a rain garden at your home safely, that's okay. Right, there's 1.3 million people that live in the Rouge. To hit that 1,000 rain garden goal, we don't need everyone to do a rain garden. So we need to make sure that the rain gardens we do build are ambassadors, that they're not creating problems, they're not threatening property and giving rain gardens a bad name. So don't force a rain garden into a space that's not going to work just so you can have a rain garden. Your rain barrels are wonderful, and that's a great place to work. And there are other strategies. If there's not space for a full-on rain garden, you could explore something like a dry well to help soak up that rain. You could try other practices just on your lawn. Oftentimes lawns are compacted. You could do, I'm blanking on the word, decompaction, plugs, an aerator. There we go, a plug aerator, basically to pop plugs out of that lawn. That's going to make your lawn less compacted and more able to soak up water again. So there's things you can do even if your space is a little tough for a rain garden. And I think it's always good to start at the easy point, especially. So if you decide a rain garden's not quite something you can do this year, maybe you can do that plug aeration. Maybe you can redirect a downspout that's on your driveway apron, the very least off the driveway apron and onto the lawn space that's near that downspout. So that way the water is not flowing directly onto the apron. So it's really, for this year, finding the things that you can do and doing those things and then planning for your success. All right, Laura, any other
Thank you.
questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew.
Mhm.
That's really helpful. And I have kind of a set of questions from Lynn H., who has been holding on this whole time
Well, thanks for
with
waiting, Lynn.
yeah, with a question near and dear to everyone's heart, our water bills.
Oh, yeah, they can be big. Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk through how a rain garden might help save money on our water bill? Is that possible for residents? And you know, actually, I know I live in the city of Birmingham, and I know that there are credits that I can receive for my rain garden that would offset my stormwater fee. Um, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, and I'll actually just make note we have about 5 minutes left before the webinar is going to kick us all off. So I'll do my best to answer it in that time, and we'll see maybe if there's a time for any more questions. You hit it spot on, Laura, in that it depends on the community that you're in. So right now, Birmingham is working to develop a fee structure. City of Detroit and City of Ann Arbor have them currently. I think Royal Oak is also working on it. And so in those communities, through your water bill, you actually get billed for your contribution, your home's contribution to stormwater in your community system. Right now, stormwater pipes are essentially unpaid for. There's no source of revenue to pay for it. So those communities have decided to take what's really a conservative solution of, paying people for, or charging people for whatever their personal responsibility is in terms of their stormwater contributions to the community system. And so in communities like that, where you're getting billed for your stormwater runoff, if you do things like rain gardens, you can get credits basically to reduce your water bill as a way to save some money. So City of Ann Arbor does that, City of Detroit does that, and some of those other communities, I believe, if they don't do it already, are working on doing that as well. The reality for the long term is that pretty much every community in Southeast Michigan wants to do this, even if they can't do it yet or they don't do it yet. There's some confusion in terms of what's legal in terms of these kinds of fees. Are they a tax? Are they a fee? And so many of these communities are waiting for clarification from the state, essentially, before they build fee systems like this. So for everyone out there, even if you're not living in Detroit, Ann Arbor, Royal Oak, or Birmingham, there's a good chance that in the next 5 years, you're going to start getting billed for the amount of stormwater runoff coming off of your property. And so even if the rain garden is not paying off now, it might in the future. But for most people, right, you're paying a water bill for the drinking water that has to get purified and then piped to your home. It's an incredibly expensive proposition to send water. It costs miles of pipes. I've heard one estimate that as much as 30 to 40% of your city's electricity bill comes from piping water. So the cost to get fresh water to your home is very, very expensive. And so if you have a rain barrel at your home, that actually can be a way to save money right now, to put that storm water to work, that rainwater to work watering your plants instead of your city water. That can be a way to start saving money right now through a rain barrel. All right, I think that about sums that one up, Laura. Are there any more questions out there in the 2 minutes that we have left?
I think we've answered, you've answered most of the questions.
Well, that worked out pretty well then, didn't it, in terms of timing? All right. Well, Lara, thank you so much for your help today. Thank you, everyone who's stuck with us this far through the Q&A. This is going to be the end of Rain Gardens 101 Get Your Lawn a Job Day 1. I hope you'll join for Day 2. Day 2 tomorrow, sizing and digging your rain garden. And if you haven't already, make sure you get to that website, therouge.org/door-prize-1 to fill out your course evaluation and get entered into the drawing for door prizes. You can win that rain barrel or a consultation from me, a virtual consultation for your home to help you design a rain garden that's going to work great in your space. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Go home tonight, get that tasty beverage, take a look at your lawn and landscape, and start thinking about where that rain garden is going to go, and come back and join us tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.